Victor, we have had UBA experience relatively strong growth in 2009, but still the market not too impressed with those numbers out last week. Some commentary being that your asset quality may not necessarily be as good as that of Zenith and GTB. What are your major pressure points at the moment?
Well, thank you very much, Aisha. It's nice to come, to meet you once again. The results that we have is the outcome of an operating environment that was a little hostile last year. And therefore, we had a lot of pressure on the provision side. The pressure we had then on the provision side is one that we're happy that we have done away with. We made a provision of about 40 billion last year. The second pressure point was in the area of our expansion across Africa. Our strategy is a long-term strategy. We want to make sure that we're able to expand our production capacity across Africa. We want to make sure that we're able to diversify a lot of our earnings from Nigeria and spread it more to Africa. That also was a pressure point for last year. But it is gratifying to know, though, that our revenue base has significantly shifted, shifted somewhat from about 3.5% that we were getting from outside of Nigeria to over 10% that we got from last year. And we are hopeful that as we settle into each of the countries where we're operating today, 2010 will be a much better year for two reasons. Mm-hmm. One, because the economies in many of the African countries have picked up. We are finding a situation where the GDP growth has improved because of the improvement in commodity prices. And the second is also because of the fact that a lot of the countries where we have set up are beginning to settle into their business and do exactly what is making us one of the best banks in Nigeria today. Well,
certainly there's a lot of elements to consider within that answer that you've just given us. So let's break it down a little bit further there. Looking at non-performing loans specifically, you've said that it has been a hindrance in the past. What percentage of NPLs are you expecting to write back for the full year this year?
Gratifying to know that the NPL level this year is going to be a lot less. Our NPL level last year was 8.7%. Our projection this year is 5%. And we believe it's achievable for two reasons also. One is the fact that we expect a lot of recoveries from the aggressive provisioning stance that we took last year. And the second is also the fact that the prudential guideline is being revised, which makes it possible for you to do long-term lending, and that puts less pressure on your NPLs in the course of the year. So we think, believe that the pressure we faced last year in terms of NPL at 8.7% will be a lot less this year.
Well, you saw an 11% increase in your in loans in the last quarter. To what sector is that going mainly, and how are you monitoring your risk more effectively in this regard?
Well, what has happened last year was that there was a little bit of credit crunch, and most of the loan lending was done by the banks that were very liquid. UBA had a liquidity ratio of over 40%. In fact, we were about 44%, and that's where we operated at. And so we had the capacity to lend. The bulk of our lending went to the oil and gas sector, the upstream. We do a lot of business in the upstream. In fact, we led a consortium of banks in the lending that we did to mobile. We also did quite a lot of, some lending to the telecoms industry. The telecoms giants, the telecom giants also benefited from that particular, from our lending. We also did some to the manufacturing sector. Mm-hmm. We hope that this year we will be doing more. We are going to be doing a lot to the agri sector. We are beneficiaries of the agri fund, and therefore we're going to lend that to the agri sector. We also think we will continue to do more in the oil and gas area, because that is an area that requires significant amount of funding, which we hopefully would also play in. Infrastructure lending is also going to take some chunk this year, because there is a lot of push from both the central bank as well as government for banks to do a lot more infrastructure lending, which is why the prudential guideline is also being revised. So I think those are the sectors we're played in, and we will pursue those sectors even further this year and incrementally also build on that.
Victor,
one sector where
Victor,
we didn't do much last year is in the consumer lending space. But with the advent, with the establishment of credit bureaus, I mean, 2 credit bureaus are today operational in Nigeria, we're quite hopeful that we'll be able to at least begin to play in that sector or resume play in that particular sector again.